Welcome to this continuation of a series of interviews with noted scholars on the content of the We the People, the Citizen and the Constitution text of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Greg Bernstein, Senior Consultant to the Center, and I will be your host for the series. Professor Casper is here to speak with us about Unit 2, How did the Framers Create the Constitution? So let's start with Lesson 8. What were the Articles of Confederation, and why did some founders want to change them? So my first question would be, why and how were the Articles of Confederation created in the first place?
And a good place to start answering that question is to explain what a confederation is. A confederation is a form of political organization in which sovereign states delegate to some central government certain specified powers. That is, each of the states retains its own self-sovereignty, and only certain powers are in the hands of some kind of central authority for the good of all. A good contemporary example of this is the European Union, whose almost 30 member states have agreed that they will coordinate certain kinds of endeavors. For instance, trade endeavors, many of them participate in the common currency, the euro, certain environmental policies, and so on. But each of those member nations retains its own complete sovereignty. And this is the situation when we look at 1777, which is when the Articles of Confederation are proposed. There were certain founders, certain leaders in the colonies who had wanted more national, or at least central coordination as far back as the 1750s. Benjamin Franklin had proposed intercolonial cooperation as far back as the 1750s. Then in the mid-1760s to 1770s, as the colonies are protesting certain acts of Parliament, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, and so on, you see intercolonial cooperation among a number of the colonies, which leads in 1774 to what became known as the First Continental Congress, when representatives of 12 states, all except Georgia, come together in Philadelphia to figure out how to coordinate their opposition to the Tea Act and the Intolerable Acts and others. After the war starts in April of 1775, a second Continental Congress assembles in Philadelphia. That's the Continental Congress that in 1776 votes to declare independence, and at the same time realizes it needs some kind of document to explain how these now 13 independent states will coordinate their efforts primarily to fight a war against the most powerful nation on earth.
I assume that the colonists recognized that there were advantages and disadvantages to Confederation? Were there?
At the time, I think, they envisioned a very loose confederation with very specific powers and no more powers than were specified in those articles that they created. So I think they didn't see disadvantages because they weren't giving up any of their own sovereignty. And in fact, as it turned out, they gave up so little of their own sovereignty that it was hard for the Confederation to do much of anything at all, although it did have certain major successes, such as fighting and ultimately winning this war.